Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. I hope you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving. I hope you were able to eat some great food, spend some time with some friends and some family, and of course, we're able to take in some great football over these past few days too. But we are gearing up now. Thanksgiving is over. We are going to enjoy these Friday games, but we're gearing up with some big games on Saturday. And it wouldn't feel like a Thanksgiving weekend without the Iron Bowl. Number 22, Auburn. Number 1, Alabama. That is our second game of the week, and there are a lot of big storylines going into this game. And we're going to break everything down for you today. We're going to break down those storylines. We're going to break down the offense and the defense and the keys to the game for both Auburn and Alabama, although this really feels like a game where you just hope Auburn covers. This feels like a game where Auburn doesn't really have much of a chance against the top-ranked team in the country, but maybe they will cover. So we're going to break everything down for you today. Let's start with a little history and the key stories going into this game. It is the 85th Iron Bowl. How about that? 2020, we are going to see the 85th meeting of Alabama and Auburn. The home team has won the last 4 games in this series. And I saw someone say the other day that this game is only good when it's in Auburn. Last year the Tigers won 48-45. Ruined Alabama's college football playoff hopes. Mac Jones had 2 crucial pick sixes, and the Crimson Tide missed a field goal late in the fourth quarter that would have tied the game. The year before that, Alabama murdered them. The year before that, Auburn won in Auburn, took down the Tide, and did a pretty dang good job of it, led by Jarrett Stidham and Gus Malzahn, that Auburn team that made the SEC championship. So yeah, maybe every time it's in Auburn it's good, every time it's in Tuscaloosa it's bad. I don't know. But we are going to be in store for hopefully a good one. And look, anytime it's a rivalry game, you can't count anybody out. Anything can happen in a rivalry game. Like we say, we throw history and records out the window for games like this. So the 85th Iron Bowl, home team usually does very well. Alabama, they're expecting them to do well. The Crimson Tide, a 24.5-point favorite going into this game. 24.5-point favorite going into this game. That spread brought to you by BetNow.eu. Their link is down in the description below. If you use that link and you use our promo code GRIDIRON, you get a 100% sign-up bonus and a $1,000 cash sign-up bonus. I'm not joking about that. So go check out that link down below. Use this spread. Use our promo code. They've got some great offers over there. It's where we place all of our bets. And also, if you'd like to know who we're taking in this Auburn-Alabama game, make sure to go over to our website, thegridironexpert.com, and sign up for our expert picks. We're hitting over 60% of our bets over the last 6 weeks. And this is one of our games for the week, Auburn and Alabama. Will we be picking the Tigers to cover or Alabama to blow them out? 24.5-point favorites, though. Let's take a look at the offenses for both teams here. Let's take a look at the offense for Auburn first. Now, there are a couple key storylines you want to look at for both teams going into this on the offensive side of the ball. First one for Auburn is there's a good chance they could be without their star running back, Tank Bigsby, and offensive tackles Alec Jackson and Brodarius Ham. All of them getting injured in some sort of capacity last week against Tennessee. And I will tell you right now that if they do not play, they're all questionable as of this filming, they're all questionable for the game. If they do not play, Auburn does not stand a chance. Because Bo Nix can't do everything by himself. He needs Tank Bigsby to take a little load off, and he certainly needs protection up front on that offensive line. So those are some storylines you need to watch out for. And for Alabama, we all know that earlier in the week, Nick Saban tested positive for COVID-19. Not for the second time. Remember the first time before that Georgia game, it was negative, but he is now positive and will miss the game against Auburn, at least in theory, assuming we don't have another false positive. But Nick Saban will not be on the sideline, in theory, for this Auburn game. And you can't help but wonder, will that play some sort of a factor? Maybe, maybe not. At least it's not the Georgia game. But Auburn, let's look at their offense here. They've really been mediocre at best. They wanted to get his rejuvenation on offense. They wanted to find some life on offense, and Gus Malzahn hired Chad Morris to come in and do that. Not my favorite hire, but so be it. The Tigers are averaging 28.6 points per game, and while they're not necessarily flashy, while at times they look good and at times they look bad, so maybe inconsistent would be a better word, they are very balanced. 232.4 passing yards per game behind Bo Nix, 170.4 rushing yards per game, led by Tank Bigsby, who may or may not be playing Saturday afternoon. You look at Auburn, though, there are two keys that we're looking at here, and I would say even problems that we're looking at here on their offense. You know, when you're facing a team like Alabama that's so high octane, so good offensively, you've got to find a way to match them step for step. And I question if Bo Nix can do that. Bo Nix, 1,627 yards on the year, 10 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, but he usually plays very poorly on the road. Just look at the two games Auburn's lost this year. Against South Carolina, Nix threw for 272 yards and a touchdown, but had 3 interceptions. You look at the game against Georgia, 177 passing yards, 1 interception, 0 touchdowns. So the two losses they've had, both coming on the road, Nix has not played very well. He has not played well at all. And you have to wonder, is that really going to change now in Tuscaloosa, in the Iron Bowl against the top-ranked team in the country? Probably not. And then that second problem, again, I keep reiterating it, were the injuries to those two offensive tackles and Tank Bigsby. They need to play. They need to play. If they do not, Auburn's chances to win and possibly even cover take a major hit. Alabama, they're one of the best offenses in the country, maybe the best offense in the country. The number one team in the country for a reason. They're averaging 49.4 points per game, 366.1 passing yards per game, and 182.4 rushing yards per game. I mean, they're averaging over 500 yards of total offense here. And people thought they were going to take a step back, believe it or not. With Tua Tagovailoa going off to the NFL, they thought, Mac Jones is our quarterback now. We're not going to be nearly as good offensively. And I would say they're just as good, if not better, now under Mac Jones. He's thrown for 2,426 yards, 18 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. And this game is personal for Mac Jones because remember, he was kind of thrust onto the scene last year when Tua went down with his injury. He played in the Iron Bowl, and Jones threw 2 crucial pick sixes. Alabama lost by 3. If Mac Jones just doesn't throw one of them, let alone 2, but just doesn't throw one of those pick sixes, Alabama wins, and who knows, maybe they get into the college football playoff. So you know Mac Jones is out for revenge. He's out to redeem himself from what was not necessarily a bad showing against Auburn. It was just, could have been better if you minus the interceptions. Alabama also led by Najee Harris, one of the best running backs in the country. 797 yards, 16 rushing touchdowns this year. Unreal stats from Mac Jones. Unreal stats from Najee Harris. Unreal stats from this Alabama offense, period. I mean, they are scoring at a ridiculous pace. Again, almost 50 points per game. They've scored at least 38 points in every single game this season. Just came off a 63-point showing against Kentucky. And you know they're going to try to show no mercy against their heated in-state rival. Defensively, let's look at Auburn again. Not too bad for the Tigers. Nothing great, but nothing too bad. 22 points per game. That's what they're allowing. They're also allowing 402.1 yards per game. And I think that's the bigger number for me. The points per game isn't too bad, but it's the yardage. We know Alabama's going to put up some big numbers. We know they're going to score a lot of points. Auburn's got to find a way to slow them down. And my biggest concern here is you're looking at this, everybody wants to talk about Mac Jones and how well he's going to play. He's out for revenge and redemption. I agree with all of that. But I want to look at what happened last week for Auburn against Tennessee, where they allowed 173 rushing yards and a touchdown to Tennessee running back Eric Gray. Auburn also allowing 222 total rushing yards in that game to the Volunteers, one that was probably a little bit closer than the score indicated. Had it not been for a 100-yard pick six by the Tigers, it would have been a 6-point victory for them. And who knows what could have happened in those final minutes. So you look at that. 222 rushing yards that led up to Tennessee. Just imagine what Najee Harris is going to be able to do. Imagine that. And imagine how great Alabama is going to be because Tennessee doesn't have a quarterback. Jarrett Garantano and every quarterback really on Tennessee's roster. Nothing compared to Mac Jones. So now you're going up against one of the better running backs in the country and one of the better quarterbacks in the country after getting torched on the defensive side of the ball by Tennessee last week. That's obviously something that's got to be a cause of concern. The one positive for Auburn is that their pass rush is starting to heat up. They have 9 sacks in their last 3 games, so averaging 3 sacks per game in that span. And that has to be encouraging if you're Gus Malzahn. To see that defensive line starting to heat up has to be encouraging for Kevin Steele, the defensive coordinator. If they can rack up a little bit of pressure on Mac Jones, maybe they can hang in this game. Maybe they can force some turnovers like they did last year, turnovers that ultimately were the difference in that Iron Bowl. Alabama, their defense, man, you talked about Auburn getting hot up on the defensive front. You talk about Alabama getting hot defensively across the board. You remember about a month and a half ago, when everybody was criticizing Alabama and they said they're not good enough to win the playoff this year because their defense is horrible, because they allowed 48 points and 700 yards to Ole Miss. Remember that? Since that game, Alabama has allowed an average of 11 points per game. They've played 4 games since then. They've allowed just 11 points per game since that point. Nick Saban turned them around. That's what good coaches and good teams do. 11 points per game. Unreal. Alabama this year allowing just 118.9 rushing yards per game. They're allowing 240.3 passing yards per game. On top of that, on top of how hot they're getting, on top of solid defensive numbers all around, they have forced 12 turnovers this season. And I would bet my money that they would get at least, I'd say, 2 turnovers in this game in some sort of capacity. So Alabama's defense, they're really starting to right the ship. They're looking like a defense that can win the college football playoff, that can win a national title, and can be up there as one of the better teams and one of the better defenses in the SEC. It's just a question of whether Auburn can exploit anything within that defense. Alabama, in that 4-game span, hasn't necessarily played an offense that's been that great. Kentucky, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Georgia, none of those offenses really scream electric and great. So maybe those numbers are a little skewed. And I would group Auburn into that category of an offense that's kind of up there with the likes of Georgia and Tennessee. Nothing too flashy, mediocre at best. Georgia before JT Daniels. Let's throw that in there as well. So let's take a look at here. What are going to be some of the keys here? 85th Iron Bowl. We looked at the offense. We looked at the defense. I think it's evident that Alabama owns the edges on both sides of the ball. There are plenty of things that Auburn maybe does better than Alabama. Plenty of things that Alabama certainly does better than Auburn. But collectively, the Crimson Tide have the ultimate edge. And they also have home field advantage. I mean, they're perfectly sound. They're in a very good spot right now for this rivalry matchup. But let's look at the keys here. One of the keys for Auburn is they have got to sustain drives and take care of the football. Now, what does that mean? Well, what I mean by that is when Auburn gets the ball, they cannot afford to quickly turn it over. They cannot afford to quickly go 3 and out and give that ball right back to Mac Jones and his Crimson Tide offense. If I'm Auburn, I'm trying to find a way to keep that offense off the field as long as possible. As long as possible. Now, sure, you get some big touchdown, 75-yard touchdown run. I'm not going to complain about it if I'm Gus Malzahn. But you want to march the ball down the field. You want to own the time of possession. And when you take these long drives, you need to convert off of them. And as we all know, field goals are not going to beat Alabama. So you've got to get in the end zone. And if I'm Gus Malzahn, I also look at this game and I say, we're not favored to win. We're on the road. So we have nothing to lose. Auburn's not in contention for an SEC title. They're not in contention for a playoff spot. So 4th and 2, 4th and 3, let's go for it. I mean, I feel like almost majority of these drives, especially when Auburn finds themselves down, have to be 4-down territory. I really do. So sustain the drives, take care of the football, get in the end zone, and try to keep Mac Jones off the field as long as possible. Another key for Auburn here, help out Bo Nix with their defense. Bo Nix, we kind of mentioned earlier in the year, I think it was in the Georgia game, how he did everything against Georgia last year and that he was going to have to do everything against Georgia this year. And he tried and just wasn't able to do it. Auburn's got a decent core of wide receivers, and at the time when they played Georgia, didn't have much of a run game. Tank Bigsby kind of emerged and became that lead back that was able to take the load off of Nix. If he doesn't play, you've got to give Bo Nix some protection, and you've got to have someone or some side of the ball step up to help Bo Nix take that load off, but make sure the pressure isn't all on him. The defense did it last year. Bo Nix didn't play bad against Alabama, but Auburn would not have won had it not been for their defense. So the defense, step up, make some plays, force some turnovers, makes your tackles, force Alabama into field goals, not touchdowns. You do a couple things like that, maybe Auburn can be hanging around halftime. And again, we've seen crazy things happen in the Iron Bowl. We've seen crazy things happen in Rivalry Week. If Auburn is in this game by halftime, if they are still in this game by halftime or midway through the third quarter, we might be in store for a very close finish. Alabama, what's the first thing they need to do? What's their first key? Run the football. I know they want to throw it. You've got Mac Jones, and you've got Devontae Smith, and you've got the best offense arguably in the country. But don't do that. You don't have to throw it because Auburn's rushing defense is suspect. They're not that great. Again, Eric Gray just thrashed them. What's Najee Harris going to do? So if I'm Alabama, I go into this game as a run-first team. I give it to Najee Harris and let him take care of business first. I'm not saying you're never going to pass, but you run a lot to set up the pass. Run a lot to set up the pass and then go deep with Mac Jones. Beautiful deep ball, and Alabama's wide receivers are fast enough and elusive enough to get open and make the play. So run first. Auburn struggled against the run last week. Why not continue to run against them this week if they're not going to be able to stop you? So that's really the only key I have for Alabama. Again, they have that offensive edge. They have that defensive edge. And I look at that, and really, if you run a lot to set up the pass, I think they're going to be just fine because this offense is capable of putting up a lot of points and big plays, and this Alabama defense is capable of holding their own. Again, they've been hot over the past 4 games, and Auburn's offense does not scream electric to me. It does not scream to be a threat to me to this Alabama defense, especially, again, if Tank Bigsby and those offensive linemen are out. Again, as of this filming, they're questionable. They are questionable, although it does not look good. So that's my key for Alabama. Just play your game, play your style, but maybe run first, rely on Harris a little bit more than Mac Jones. So what's our final outlook for this game, guys? What's going to happen down in Tuscaloosa on Saturday afternoon? Top 25 showdown in the Iron Bowl, the 85th meeting. As we've said, home team has won 4 straight in the series. And like we said at the beginning of the video, this game feels more like one where you're going to ask, can Auburn cover than can Auburn win? I know people will say people are sleeping on Auburn, that you're underestimating Auburn. And I wouldn't say we're doing that. But I would say when you've looked at Auburn's body of work over the course of the year, they've lost to South Carolina, they've lost to Georgia, probably should have lost to Arkansas, probably should have lost to Ole Miss, and the game against Tennessee way too close last week. Had it not been for that 100-yard pick six, like we mentioned, it would have been a lot closer. So in this game down in Tuscaloosa, I think Alabama takes care of easy business. I think they take care of easy business here. They win the game by at least 17. I think they win this game by at least 17 points. 2 years ago, following a loss to Auburn, I think they beat the Tigers by 31. Was it 52-21 in Tuscaloosa? They're going to be hungry for revenge after their playoff hopes ended last year, the Tigers. Mac Jones will be hungry for redemption after costing them the game against the Tigers. I know other people have too, but Mac Jones a major reason. Alabama's hungry, and they're the number 1 team in the country. The playoff rankings just came out. They want to show the committee and show the nation that they still deserve that number 1 spot. And I think they come out there, flex their muscles, and take care of Auburn easily. And I think this game actually is over by the third quarter, midway through the third quarter. If not before, I think Alabama will be so far ahead where you can turn off your TV and go somewhere else. But the Crimson Tide will win the 85th Iron Bowl. To be expected. Not much of a surprise to anybody. But again, it's rivalry weekend. It's the Iron Bowl. Crazy things have happened. You can't count anybody else, and you always have to be prepared for the unexpected. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue, guys, to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also make sure to check out everything down in that description below. If you love college football, everything down there and everything on this channel is for you. We've got our Patreon account, our BetNow account, like we mentioned. Go sign up on that link. Sign up for our expert picks to get our spread pick for Auburn and Alabama, along with countless other spread picks over the course of the year. Again, we're hitting over 60% of our bets over the past 6 weeks. And then, of course, sign up for our newsletter as well on our website, thegridironexpert.com. All those things right down there, down in the description. Make sure to go check them out. And again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.